All right, wonderful. So, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Board of Behavioral Sciences Telehealth Committee meeting. Today is January 22nd, 2021, and the time now is 8:38 a.m. And this meeting is being broadcasted by WebEx and at various locations. And so at this time, I will hand over to the moderator, to explain, how the meeting is going to implement.
Good morning, this is the moderator. For public comment today, we will be utilizing the WebEx question and answer feature. When the chair calls for public comment, we will be opening that. We refer to it as the Q&A panel. You should see a Q&A icon on your screen. Typically, it's the bottom right corner, depending on the device you're on. If you were to click on that icon, once I activate it, it will open a panel, such as displayed on the screen currently, and you would type, "I would like to make a comment," into that ask field, and then submit that to all panelists. We will be taking public comment in the order that they are received. And if there are multiple requests for comment from the same person, just know that we will be giving every first-time requester the right to make the comment first, and then we will circle back to anybody who wants to make a second comment. We do ask for you to remain professional, no profane language, and I will be calling on you based on the name that you've logged in with. When I do call on your name, I will let you know that I've unmuted your microphone, that you will have 2 minutes to speak, and I will be giving you a 15-second reminder. At the end of that 2 minutes, I will then mute your microphone, and we will continue on to the next public commenter. Thank you.
Thank you so much, our moderator. This is lovely to explain to us how the public comment section is going to work. And our public comment section will be after our agenda items, at the end of our discussion of the agenda items. And so at this time, I would like to have Christina to help us establish a quorum.
Good morning. Christina Wong.
Here.
Susan Friedman.
Here.
And for the record, Crystal Anthony is absent. We have a quorum.
Thank you so much, Christina. And so let's proceed to the introduction. And so I will start with the board member first, and then the other panelists, and then will be the board staff. So let's see. So let me introduce myself. I'm Christina Wong. I'm a LCSW member and the chair of this committee meeting. And next is Susan.
Hi, I'm Susan Friedman. I'm a public member of the Board of Behavior Sciences, and I'm in Los Angeles.
Thank you very much. And then I think the next will be, let's see, Roseanne, maybe you can introduce yourself.
Yes, I'm Roseanne Helms. I'm the legislative manager with the board.
Right. Thank you, Roseanne. And then Steve.
Hi, Steve Sodergren. I'm the Assistant Executive Officer for the board.
And I have Sabina.
Good morning, Sabina Knight, Legal Counsel for the board.
And I have also Christy.
Good morning, Christy Berger, Regulatory Analyst for the board.
Thank you, Christy. And then I think the last, I have another Christina.
Hi, Christina Kimura. I'm the Administrative Analyst for the board.
Thank you very much. Did I miss anybody? The board staff? I think we're good. Thank you very much. And then the next one, we're going to move to our discussion agenda item. And the first one is the overview of purpose and role of the committee. And I believe is Roseanne.
Yes, so this is kind of going over the reasons why we're here today and sort of the background for this committee and kind of a discussion of where we want it to go. So we've established this special telehealth committee to determine if any of the board's statutes and regulations related to the practice of telehealth by our licensees, registrants, and trainees need to be updated or clarified. Right now, we have two main law sections that govern telehealth. Business and Professions Code Section 2290.5 it's a general code section. It applies to all healing arts licensees. and it's the main statute that pertains to our board's licensees for telehealth. And there's a link in your packet to section 2290.5 for reference. We also have our regulation section 1815.5, and that was established in 2016 to give the board licensees some specific guidance on telehealth and what's expected when they're practicing telehealth. Due to the COVID-19 state of emergency, of course, we've discovered a lot of areas regarding telehealth that could use some updating. A lot of our licensees obviously started using telehealth, and that's raised several different issues. So I've kind of made a list in today's packet, and we can kind of go through them, and I'll discuss each one briefly, and then we can open it up to a wider discussion to see if there's anything else that stakeholders have concerns about, and kind of the direction we want to go. So after talking to stakeholders, licensees, board staff, board members, we've come up with a pretty long list of issues related to telehealth that are probably worthy of discussing. Some of them are in the code sections I just mentioned, and some of them are kind of sprinkled throughout our licensing practice acts, kind of in regards to supervision and remote telehealth for trainees and pre-licensees. So I'll go through these, and then we can go from there. One of the issues that's been raised is the ability of pre-licensees who are still in their master's program, which are trainees, to perform services via telehealth. In Business and Professions Code 2290.5, it states that MFT trainees are allowed to perform services via telehealth, but professional clinical counselor trainees and social work interns are not listed. So those two categories have a little bit of different requirements or standards that they're held to than MFT trainees, because MFT trainees count pre-degree hours and they don't. So that's why we might want to discuss that topic. The second item is the ability of MFT and PCC trainees to gain required practicum hours via telehealth. So that would be possible clarification of the face-to-face terminology in the code. Number 3 is the allowable settings for pre-licensed individuals to perform services via telehealth. For example, can it be from home? A lot of people are working from home right now, and so we have some law waivers allowing supervision and telehealth to be from home, but typically for some settings it has to be from the work site, or the law kind of implies that, or is ambiguous. So another question that comes up is, can a trainee or an associate perform services with clients located in California if they're temporarily out of state? Some people who are in school have left California and are doing school remotely now, and that's posed problems for them gaining their practicum. And private practice law regarding private practices does state that the supervisor must be at the same site. So is it time to take a look at that? The fourth item is the supervision via video conferencing requirements for both associates and trainees. The use of the word face-to-face in sections defining direct supervisor contact. Should supervisors via video conferencing be allowed in more settings? If so, how much? What about trainees? Number 5 is the review of the BBS telehealth regulations, including discussion of 1815.5E. That's the requirement to follow the laws and regulations of the other state when practicing telehealth with a client located there. So I know that we had some concerns when the telehealth regulations first came out about that particular section, and some requests to discuss it further. We might want to examine discuss newer delivery methods being offered, such as email, texting, app-based therapy. That was something that was raised in our recent sunset hearing, as well as also discussion of the possibility of regulating online therapy sites located in California. That can probably be done to a certain extent via advertising guidelines, and the particular licensee is what's regulated in those cases, but that might be worth a discussion as those kind of businesses become more and more common. Another possible area is the possibility of adding a temporary or incidental allowance for out-of-state licensees to perform services for clients that have moved to California or are temporarily located in California. We get a lot of calls from people who are either in an emergency situation, have moved here due to COVID, or they're traveling for college, so it's more incidental that they happen to be out of town. Some other licensing boards, including Psychology Board, have a short allowance for transitional therapy. Another thing that might be worth looking at, which we'll examine a little bit today, is the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs has a telehealth allowance that basically exempts the Veterans Affairs worker therapists from state licensing laws, and so we'll take a look at that. Possibly may want to do an examination and discussion of interstate compacts. Possibly a discussion of telehealth and Medicaid or Medicare reimbursement. That was a suggestion from NASW, so we can talk about that further. And then finally, discussion of outreach strategies. How do we educate Californians who are going to be more likely doing therapy via telehealth about online therapy and their rights pertaining to it, and possible downfalls that online therapy might pose, or possible benefits. So those are the topics that we came up with, and there might be more. That's why we're having this conversation, and we might want to have these in a certain order. This is going to be, it's a big topic, so it's going to be, a process, but I think the end result will be really good and provide us some updated laws that eliminate a lot of the questions and problems that we hear about. So I'm going to open it up for discussion at this point.
Thank you so much, Roseanne. This is really, really awesome and thorough. And I also want to just make a remark that this list of the questions are the cumulative, the list, from all public comments and, suggestions. So it's really wonderful and comprehensive. And so I also want to remind everybody that for this particular time, we would like to just not to discuss any of the details, of the topics, but really is to add, or, to talk about, what really is the most, important, things that we want to discuss first. So I hope I make it clear, we will save, the details of the discussion, at the later meetings. Not today, but later, in the correct forum. And so I will first go to our board member, and that would be Susan, and myself, to talk about, if there's anything, that we want to add. And then the next, we will open it up to the public. And so, Susan, any things that you want to add, in terms of the list of these topics? Susan, you're mute. You're on mute.
Am I still muted?
You're good. Thank you. We can hear you. Wonderful.
The topics are extremely thorough and cover just about everything that you can think of. I'm not sure in all of this if there's anything where we will discuss how a licensee will somehow or other register. I mean, we may need to come up with a new system because COVID has changed everything so rapidly and so dramatically. And basically, you can't practice any kind of therapy today unless you're doing telehealth because you're not allowed to be face-to-face. It's too dangerous. So I'm just wondering if we need to come up with a whole new system for registering, for licensees to register themselves with some particular thing that says, I have been registered to do telehealth, to do FaceTime, to do whatever it is that they're planning to do.
So it sounds like, it's about the competency. And I think that is, that this is a very valid point, that, do we need to, possibly, require, registrant, to demonstrate that, they have the, they have the knowledge and the skill, and also the understanding, of the law and ethics of the telehealth practice. And so I think that's actually, thank you so much. I love it. Thank you very much. Yeah. So let's see. So I think this is very good. So I'm going to open up for the public. And so moderator, would you please, help us bring them on?
This is the moderator. We have opened the Q&A panel. If you'd like to make a public comment, please click on the Q&A icon on your screen. Type "I would like to make a comment" into the Ask field and submit that to all panelists. We will wait for a few moments to allow people time to submit. Our first request for comment comes from Denise Tugid. I apologize if I have butchered your last name. Your microphone is unmuted and you will have 2 minutes.
Hello, board and staff. Thank you so much for your time. Denise Tugade with SEIU United Healthcare Workers. We represent licensed clinical social workers, medical social workers, and a number of other licensees across the state, including at large healthcare systems like Kaiser, Dignity, et cetera, and others. And I wanted to just thank Roseanne and Stephen in particular for all the work and responsiveness in meeting the needs of our associate social workers who are struggling just like Board Member Friedman mentioned in these pandemic times to try and find clinical hours. We've raised the issue in previous meetings of having our members across different parts of the Kaiser system and hoping to get some clarity and some assistance so that they can, get their licenses and go on and serve the public. So thank you.
Our next request for comment comes from Helena Ditko. Helena, your line is open. You will have 2 minutes.
Hi, good morning. Thank you for the very comprehensive list. Helena Ditko, Los Angeles County Department of Mental Health, Clinical Policies and Standards. Just in regards to telehealth, I'm concerned about 5150 applications and also including children in the major topics, specifically for me, 5585, and whether or not there's going to be any guidance from BBS on that. Thank you.
Our next request for comment comes from Lindsay Lopez. Lindsay, your line is open. You will have 2 minutes.
Great, thank you. I just wanted to ask a quick question. When a clinician is facilitating therapy via telemed, do they need to have their license posted?
Can you say it again? License what? You just break up a little bit.
Sure. When they're facilitating therapy via telemedicine, do they need to have their license displayed in the background?
Good question. Thank you. I love this technical issues. Yep. Thank you.
And we have a request for comment from Shanna Todd. I'm going to try her microphone. She indicated she may be having issues with it. Shanna, I have unmuted you. Can you speak and see if we can hear you? Okay, I've muted you again. We cannot seem to hear you. So Shanna, if you want to go ahead and in this instance, type in your comment and then I can read it to the committee. So our next request for comment comes from Michael Levy. Michael, your line is open. You will have 2 minutes. Michael Levy, this is the moderator. I've unmuted your microphone. All right, we will come back to him. Shad Cruz is our next commenter. Shad, your line is open. You will have 2 minutes.
Thank you. I just wanted to get some clarification. I heard you use the term trainees in regard to people still in school, and I've heard pre-licensed. I would just like a little clarification regarding, is that meaning associate clinical social workers, MFTIs, and where exactly people still in the associate status stand in regard to all these policies? Thank you.
I think this is something that we certainly can, explain now. So Roseanne, would you please just, quickly, help clarify? Roseanne's muted.
I had a hard time hearing part of the question. Can you repeat it, please?
Sure. I was just wondering about the status of associates in regard to these policies, meaning associate clinical social workers, MFTIs, etc. As we fall kind of between those who are trainees and actually fully licensed practitioners.
So yeah, everybody, associates are generally permitted to practice via telehealth. However, the law in certain areas, like about supervision and about trainees, is a little bit less clear. In some places, for MFT trainees, it's definitely covered. For other types of trainees, it's a little bit more vague. So definitely there's some work that needs to be done in the law regarding that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, and our next request for comment comes from Mary Tretola. Mary, your line is open and you will have 2 minutes. And may I ask, when you're finished, if you could please lower your hand.
Absolutely. Good morning, board members. Quick question. I just wanted to clarify, are we answering the question as to whether or not, we believe or what our thoughts are on mandated telehealth training? Or are we just commenting on sections or the agenda that the board is presenting today? Just trying to clarify.
So yes, go ahead, Roseanne, since you raised your hand.
I was going to say, if you think that mandated telehealth training, that could be added as a topic. We're kind of discussing what we need to discuss for future meetings. So yeah, mandated telehealth training, I'll definitely write that one down.
Got it. Thank you.
Our next commenter is Shanna Todd. Her microphone is not working. And her comment is submission of request for consideration of waiver of amount of hours gained in telehealth under option 2 for AMFT due to restrictions on delivery.
I'm not quite sure, I'm not quite, get the, question. So, I wonder, if, is it just or Roseanne, are you clear about,
I think she's asking about option 2. So option 2 statutorily ended December 31st. Everybody who didn't submit their application by the law has to go under option 1 now. If they did submit under option 2 and they got a deficiency letter, then they have more time to gain hours under option 2. So that should be, you can contact us separately about that question if you have a particular question, but option 2 is pretty much ended except for the people that had the deficiencies.
So I hope this clarified, that question, because, obviously it's about gaining hours and so, good, to clarify, but at the same time, it looks like, that, with the option 2 fading out, that should help, to know that, that's, that option is no longer going to be there soon. So, yeah. Okay. Thank you, Roseanne. So anything else?
Yes, our next comment comes from Stephen Tierney. Stephen, your line is open. You will have 2 minutes.
Thank you very much. It'll be very quick. I thank you to the staff and board for this really comprehensive agenda and for allowing us to be present for it. The question, I've been doing some clinical supervision training around the Bay Area, and the question that keeps coming up is that prior to the COVID state of emergency, to do telehealth, there was a requirement to have a scope of competence, which I think a previous speaker might have mentioned, those mandatory training, the idea. And I'm just wondering if in the comprehensive agenda today or at a future meeting, we can clarify, because clinical supervisors are really confused about or questioning about if they themselves have scope of competence and how can they be training their trainees and associates if they're not sure what scope of competence in telehealth means. And it's been waived for right now, but yeah, what's the board's position on having some competence to do this important work? Thank you.
So, thank you. And so, Roseanne, you do have an explanation, huh? Go ahead.
Yeah, I think that's a great question, and it kind of goes right along with the, do we want to require some sort of a training to do telehealth? So I think that's definitely another agenda item. That's a great one.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes. And I think, that comes along with, what, really requires on the form and, what would be, required for not just about the licensees, but also for the supervisor. So actually, it really expands, the need, for training and the insurance of competency. So very good. Thank you very much, Stephen. Moderator, back to you.
Our next commenter is Krista Tipton. And Krista, your line is open. You will have 2 minutes.
Thank you. My question was about whether telehealth would be considered a therapeutic modality in the idea of having a scope of competence. So I was glad that that was addressed. I'm a co-chair of the NASW Technology Council and a social worker in elder abuse. And our tech council has been talking about how best to bring together the schools and the different organizations in the BBS to look at that scope of competence and create a platform across all of them. So I'm very excited to hear that this is something that we're discussing now, the state level. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Krista. And hi, Krista. So, so back to the competency, that's wonderful. Thank you, Roseanne. And thanks, Krista. And next, yes, go ahead.
Our next commenter is Cassandra Clayton. Cassandra, your line is open. You will have 2 minutes.
Oh, good morning. So I'll just read what my actual question is. That there's a lot of fragmentation between the states for standards and length of time that each state allows for delivering telehealth services to another state outside of California. How can the BBS streamline this information or create uniform standards with other states?
Wonderful, wonderful. You're definitely thinking, not just about us, but, how do we really bring the standard to become the standard, of the nation? So that is really, really great. So thank you so much, Cassandra.
Thank you.
And so just FYI, for Shanna Todd, the assistant EO, Steve Sodergren, is going to send you his direct contact information in the chat field to you, so be looking out for that. It looks like our next comment is from Hannah Thompson. Hannah, your line is open and you will have 2 minutes.
Thank you. I work a lot with college students, and I think this was already somewhat on the agenda, but I wanted to highlight it, and that is the idea of clarifying temporary movement. So, a college student going home for a summer break, but is working with clinical services in California, and when we make clear definitions around where a client stands and where they are, which board is responsible for their services. Thank you.
So Hannah, good question. And then stay tuned because we will certainly discuss this, in the little bit later, of our meeting today. So, so your feedback will be welcome for sure.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
And this is the moderator. We have no further requests for public comment. Would you like me to close the Q&A panel?
Awesome. So, so Roseanne, with all the wisdom and comments from the public, I think we could develop a fairly, even more comprehensive and not just about a comprehensive list, not just about relating to California, but also, how we can actually, bring that standard, to, outside California. So I want to thank these wonderful, wonderful questions, your public feedback. And I think, Roseanne, for this purpose, then we accomplished this agenda item, and I'm sure you have a lot of work to do.
It sounds like it, yes. So what I'm kind of envisioning is we'll split this into, this committee is going to last a while, obviously, because we have some very big topics to cover. So I'm going to kind of split the meetings into a few related topics each time. So each time we'll be discussing 3 or so topics that sort of relate together. So probably first I'll go with, some of the supervision and the trainees, stuff that relates to actual languages. And in some meetings we'll be discussing bigger issues like maybe the supervisor training or not the supervisor training, the point that was raised about telehealth training for licensees and what's the scope of competence. And another discussion we can have is more about like the county level and how things work there with the 5150 and the Medicaid and Medicare. And another potential meeting would be something like, how do we regulate the online sites? Is that necessary? So we'll kind of go from there. And if at any meeting somebody wants, feels like another topic needs to be brought in for the next meeting along with something, then they feel free to say that. So
yeah,
I'm going to try to break it up into smaller pieces, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Right. Well, and I'm sure that, some of those items are so overlapping with the licensing committee, so maybe even, you can just kind of like, see how you can partialize it. And so it's not too overwhelming for one committee.
Definitely. Yeah, definitely that we've got our work cut out for us, but I think it's good. And our practice setting definition bill touches a little bit on some of these areas too. So we'll see a little bit of that at the February 5th Policy and Advocacy Committee meeting as well.
Yes, definitely. So, so Roseanne, you definitely, do things like now you have a lot of work to do and you also know the priorities and, what to do. Yeah. And so I'm very thankful for everybody's feedback and comments. And so before I move on to the next topic, let's just open it once again. Anybody missed anything? Board members, Susan, good to go? Public, doesn't look like there's any more raised hands. So okay, I think we can move to the second one.
Okay, so the next agenda item, a lot of times when we discuss various topics, including telehealth, the question comes up is, what do other states do? So I thought that I would kind of prepare. I looked at several other states' licensing laws, and a big thank you to CAMPT because they, in 2016, in their Therapist magazine, they put together a really comprehensive list of what other states do for telehealth. And of course, that changes all the time, so it's hard to 100% keep up with it. But I took a look at CAMPT's list of other telehealth laws, and I kind of pulled out the states that were doing different things. A lot of states just say, in order to do telehealth, you need to have a license in our state if the client's there. But there's some states that have done some different things. So I pulled out some of those and researched them a little bit further. And so I wanted to just kind of go through these ideas briefly so that we have them in the back of our head as we turn to other discussion topics. And also so we can maybe use this as a reference later. So if the question comes up, we can have it handy and we can kind of say, well, here's what this state does. If we liked this idea, or we didn't like this idea. So some of the notable examples that I found interesting, and I've included a link or an attachment to the law for each, kind of a summary to the law for each one, but some things that I kind of found that were different and interesting than the majority, which is just you need to be licensed in our state. The state of Arizona allows an exemption from licensure for a therapist who's not a resident there if the person performs behavioral health services in Arizona for no more than 90 days in one calendar year, and if they're authorized to perform therapy by their state where they reside, and if they inform the client that they're not licensed in Arizona and that it's a limited service. And a licensee who does teletherapy with a client in Arizona, of course, has to obey all Arizona laws and their jurisdictional practice laws. So they kind of have that requirement in their law. The state of Colorado has something similar. They permit therapists licensed in other states to practice there if the services are within the scope of the other person's license and they don't exceed 20 days per year, and if they disclose they're not licensed. So that's another example of what another state does. District of Columbia, they're a little bit different because they have a lot of neighboring, really close by states, obviously because they're very small. So they have some interesting provisions. They have an exemption to practitioners if treatment is provided in a case of emergency. So that's one thing that's come up in our discussion of telehealth in other states is what if it's an emergency? We can't really control what the laws are in other states, but we can control what we do here and hope others will use it as an example. DC also has an exemption for a licensee in another state who's providing care for a limited time or is consulting with a patient if they have a comparable state license. And then they also have a practice allowance for adjourning states. It's kind of like a reciprocity. If their state allows practice, then DC will allow practice. Florida has a licensure exemption for therapists if they're performed no more than 15 days in a calendar year. Similar thing with New Jersey. They're a little bit more specific. They have an exemption for a practice for a period of not to exceed 10 consecutive business days or 15 business days in any 90-day period. I think that any 90-day period is probably a good limit for enforcement so that it's really clear how often it can be done. And they actually have the practitioner has to be residing outside of the state, and they actually have to give the board a summary of their qualifications and 10 days notice. Utah does something kind of similar to New Jersey. They have a really specific process outline for a client who's relocating there. If the client is relocating there, an individual who's licensed in another state has a practice exemption for that client. If the client is already a client of the person immediately before they move to Utah, it can only be transitional therapy for 45 days, beginning on the day of relocation. And they have to provide the state of Utah's licensing board written notice that they're going to do this transitional therapy. The state of Wyoming also does a licensure exemption for 30 days. They also permit unlicensed persons to provide non-clinical case management to a client. They define what that is, and one of the things is case management services, which includes crisis intervention. So they've got kind of that emergency rule too, that if there's an emergency, you can treat. And so there's a little bit of elaboration in their law about that. Those are the other states. There's a couple of other things of notice that I've included. California Board of Psychology, they also are subject to the same telehealth law as us, Business and Professions Code 2290.5. They have not, unlike this board, they haven't adopted telehealth regulations yet. They are working on those right now. The psychology board's telehealth regulations are currently finishing up a 15-day notice, and they're working on submitting those. So they're going through the process and getting feedback. They've looked at our regulations and some other telehealth regulations in order to formulate theirs. I've included their proposed regulations as reference H. There's a link in your packet if you're interested. They have some interesting provisions in there. They're a little bit different than ours. So that's interesting. The Board of Psychology also has permits a person who's licensed as a psychologist at a doctoral level in another state or country, or in the U.S. or Canada, sorry, to offer services in California for a period not to exceed 30 days in any calendar year. And they've actually, I talked to my counterpart over Psychology Board, at some point they would like to make that 30 consecutive days in any calendar year. So I don't, it sounds like that's kind of a topic of discussion with them right now. And so I know that when we had our telehealth committee back in 2015, we had looked at the practice exemption kind of clause, and there were some concerns about enforcement. So that's something that we could talk about as well. Psychology Board indicates they've only had one case that they're aware of where somebody broke the 30-day practice window. And then finally, the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs. That's really interesting what they've done. So I've included information about that rule as well. Veterans Affairs was having issues with their veterans not having access to care because they live in various areas throughout the country. And so in order to make access to therapy services more equal, and because they're a federal agency and they have overridden state law, and basically for therapists in working for the Department of Veterans Affairs in the scope of their work, the rule overrides state licensing laws. So it doesn't matter where the provider or the patient is located. The therapist can provide services to that patient within the scope of their employment with Veterans Affairs. It doesn't matter if the person's not physically located at a VA facility in doing their therapy. So I've included some information about that. So again, this is really just some background material to kind of get us started, because a lot of times, the question comes up is what are other states doing? And there's a lot of information out there. So this is some of it, and I'll open it up for discussion.
Thank you, Roseanne. This is very thorough, research, about the relevant telehealth practice, across the different states. So, so basically, I think, our discussion really is about whether it will be, what type of services will be allowed for the out-of-state licensees, and then what, the type of, to what extent that, we want to really limit, the nature of the services, whether it's from non-clinical to emergency, or, like DC, that similar to the reciprocity process. And so I think, this will be a really interesting discussion. And so to me, when I'm thinking about, how, we want to be the model state, I think it is important for us to, have that limit, and yet also be able to, definitely, set a certain parameters, what can be done. And so I really like, I kind of like, want to have like a middle role, so it's not like, just for emergency, but at the same time, that, to allow not just, like one of our applicant, our commenter, talked about, like, sometimes students just come back, they stay in the, out of state for the summertime for 3 months. And how can we also allow that? And so, and also, bear in mind our need, to have the consumer protection, which is the most important thing. And so I think I love to hear from the other, board members, maybe Susan, sorry to put you on the spot, because, you're the other committee members. And so what is your thought? Susan, can you turn on the mute?
There is a lot to consider here, and our world has been turned upside down by COVID. I assume if we were to take things in chunks, as Roseanne suggested, that would be the best approach, but we're going to have the board agree to a lot of whatever it is that we're going to change, or whatever it is that we think needs to be changed. Personally, one of the things that I feel very strongly about is the advertising, because so many people are in need of mental health, some kind of mental health help right now. It may be anxiety, it may be it may be depression. We're not talking about serious mental illnesses. We're talking about people who've been locked up for a year. I mean, anybody who's been locked up for a year has some kind of a mental health problem. And the advertising, in fact, I was just going to show you one thing. I mean, it just popped out because every single magazine that you open, every single one has an advertisement right in the front. I mean, I don't know if you can see this. Maybe you can. Anyway, it was just on the front page of this happens to be a very prestigious magazine. This is the New York Times Sunday magazine. But it just says, you know, are you feeling down about being isolated, your job, all the negative news? Well, who isn't feeling that? And then they have a barcode that you can scan. And so there's going to be millions and millions of advertisements like this. And we have to think about how we're going to deal with that and how we're going to advise the public to deal with that, because it's overwhelming. How do they make a decision? How do they know that these people are qualified? How do they know that these people are the people that they need? I don't know. It's definitely something that's percolating in my mind and that I'm very concerned about.
Yeah, definitely, Susan. So, I think I think that's definitely, kind of like refer back to, our last item that we talked about too, it's that, requirement about the competency, and also, when you have, a person advertising that, or whether the therapist, is licensing, in California, and, trying to practice out of state, and trying to reach out to that type of clients. And so, so I think that is important, that we, really consider, the location, and how that's, even all these reaching out and advertisements going to work. And so thank you so much, Susan. And
I also think, Christina, that we have to think about how we are going to communicate to the public what's going on, because we really need to do that. We really need to think very carefully about doing that and doing it quickly.
Yes, absolutely. So awesome. Thank you so much, Susan, for your comments. So at this point, let me open up to the public and love to hear, what the public has, your feedbacks are, your comments are. So moderator, would you please help us?
This is the moderator. We have opened the Q&A panel for requests for public comment. If you'd like to make a comment, please click on the Q&A icon on your screen. Type "I would like to make a comment" into the Ask field and submit that to all panelists. We will pause for just a moment to allow submission of requests. In the meantime, Mr. Sodergren, I see that your hand is up.
Oh, well, thank you for addressing me. I appreciate it. I just had to make a quick comment on the one of the things I think is important that one of the things I think we need to talk about on this is some sort of registration system that wouldn't be burdensome, that can actually be quick for people coming in to actually practice. So just want to make sure we get that on there, have that idea right now. Yeah, so that's about it. Thank you.
So Steve, so what you're saying is that, for those out of state system, it can be, it can have like a more, a formal process, for the out of state people to, inform the board. And then we have kind of like a registration list. And so that we can monitor, the length of time.
Yes, correct. Because it's really, there's no way to really, monitor that unless we do have them. The key point, though, I think would be is to not make it burdensome where it would take a processing time of a certain period, but even just something that they share with us their verification of out-of-state licensure, and something that would be simple, but we could actually track.
Yes. So that would be, very similar to Arizona, that they have to, inform, the board. I think there was one, and then I think there was another one that it was New Jersey, that they have to provide a summary.
I don't know about
Utah also.
Utah also, yes, right.
I'm not sure about the summary, but that's a good idea. But yeah, like I say, not burdensome. So,
Right.
yeah.
And this is actually very good to know, because I think, when I think about, the whole informing the board, then, I always think about, like, the board has, right now we have like 120 something thousand, of the licensees and registrants, so if we allow, if we have, an influx of the out of state people to come and practice, because of student coming from out of state, and back home to California, then I just don't want to be a very burdensome and a cumbersome and a very lengthy process, for the licensees, to come to California. So it's really good to know that the mechanism can be in place.
And just the last thing too, I would like to encourage the committee to, the temporary waivers are definitely needed in for situations like this, especially emergency situations. But I mean, it's a larger topic that it's going to take us quite a while to probably piece through everything. We're going to do it in different committees, the licensing committee and such, but really looking at not as a temporary basis, but how do we address, on an ongoing basis? Because eventually, I mean, telehealth is going to be, I'm assuming, in the future is going to be one of the major modalities, and it does offer some benefits. It does open access, but I think that's this is a good start to do the, the emergency. And this actually is kind of a step where we still have that consumer protection, which is good. And I think the larger question for us down the line is, yes, moving on, how is this, not as a temporary basis, but then how do we really do the consumer protection for an ongoing basis and allowing that access, not trying not to limit as much telehealth, but
yes.
That's kind of just wanted to point that out. So.
Thank you. Great minds think alike. So it's amazing that how I can say the same thing. We have the same idea, but just saying in a different way. But I just really love the, the assurance that, when you wrap, for one, it's about the mechanism. For two, I think, when we've always been talking about like the temporary license, right? And that is totally, related to, to this kind of the situation. So should we open that that arena, to really talk about like, should it be just a registration process or whether it should be like a temporary license? I think this is very warrant, to further discuss, because I think we have to look at, our staff, that how much can we take on, but at the same time, really, not just about that. It's also about like, how do we make sure, the standard of the mental health services are being be consistent. So that's why we require all these different trainings, for the licensees, so for those people who come to practice, I think it is important that, they are, whatever the service, they're up to that quality also. And so, wonderful. So any other board members, staff?
Christina,
Yes.
Wait, am I muted again?
No, you're fine. I can hear you.
I think we have to assume that the people that we have licensed are practicing adequately. We're not overseeing what they do normally. So to think that we're going to oversee what they're doing on telehealth, that's not going to happen. But I can tell you from my experience last week, the Senate the government, the legislature is really interested in this. This is the way it's going to be in the future. So we have to take a leadership role quickly and decide what are the most important things that we need to decide. And those important things have to do with protecting the public. Yes. And so I think we need to prioritize among these things, which are the most important in protecting the public.
Absolutely.
Because they don't know if the person they're talking to when they answer one of these ads is somebody who just put an ad in the paper. They don't know. How do they know?
Right. Absolutely. I think the consumer protection is our highest mandate. And so, we want to make sure that, whatever we do, we have this mission have in mind. And so definitely that's why we're on the board. So, so Susan, you're at the right place. So thank you. And so, Roseanne, I see that, you have your hands up, right? Go ahead.
I do. I think that, this really brings up a lot of topics that go back to our list about the out of state and how do we look at that? And I know the legislature, Susan's right, the legislature is concerned about that as well. I think there's a few different options in terms of just to piggyback on what Steve said. Do we want to do a registration system? The pros and cons with that are there's delays because we only have so much staff. Another thing that's a possibility is we do something simple like New Jersey that you're required to notify us, and maybe that just triggers, we send you an informational sheet about our laws related to telehealth. That way it's kind of a comprehensive document all in one place with some information about mandated reporting in California and our telehealth requirements and things like that. That way they don't have to go hunting all over our website for it. It's kind of just delivered to them. So there's a lot to think about here, and I think again with what Susan said, we have to break it up into pieces and kind of handle it topic by topic because there's a lot of big topics here.
Right. Absolutely. And it's amazing that, this kind of like always circular around, right? Whether, again, like we say, how do we actually, be able to just monitor, and not to be so cumbersome, and so, and yet, we can still, have our mandates. So I'm interested. Actually, I'm very interested in from the public and see what their experiences are, and then we can actually, be able to, really learn from the line workers like you all, and be able to craft, legislation that is really pertain, to the practice. So let's open up the line for public comments. So moderator, here you go.
All right, this is the moderator. Our first request comes from Josie Baker. Josie, your line is unmuted. You will have 2 minutes.
Good morning to the board, and thank you for this really, really timely topic. And I really appreciate Susan Friedman's comments regarding just how pervasive the mental health issues are amongst the entire country and probably world, but also kind of the immediacy of the issue and just this high need to act and not, kind of create some parameters so that we in the mental health community can be providing the best care to our clients that we can and provide them access. I also want to say, Roseanne, thank you for your really thorough and informative research. I know you spent a lot of time on that, so we're really appreciative. By the way, just to remind some of the board members, I work for Kaiser as well. And I'm a medical social worker there. And just to kind of give you feedback on the ground, my families are falling apart. So I work in pediatrics, so I work with kids, but it's really hard to get to families when, to help the child when the parents are falling apart. So I am really grateful that we're afforded the opportunity, and Kaiser was very proactive and nimble in terms of providing. I do clinics, interdisciplinary clinics with our programs for that are virtual the entire time. It's kind of an amazing feat. I'm really proud of it. But I can't imagine if I did not have this medium to utilize. On the flip side, I know I'm running out of time, but the consideration on the flip side of our new and up and coming ASWs really needs to be looked at and considered, because we're going to have a lot of vicarious trauma amongst our current LCSWs and a lot of potential burnout. And so I think training up those new ASWs is really important. So supervision on the flip side of this issue is also a very important issue to me. And I really appreciate your time and listening to me. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Josie. So this is good. Again, reiterate, just the importance of the competency. So wonderful. Anybody else, moderator?
Yes, and Ms. Baker, if I can just remind you to lower your hand now that you've spoken, please. Our next comment comes from Michael Levy. Michael, your line is open. You will have 2 minutes. Michael, I don't know if you can hear us. Michael, if you'd like to type your comment into the Q&A field, because I believe you're having some audio issues, and then I can read it from there, or...
Thank you. Can you hear me now?
Oh, yes, we can. Thank you.
My apologies for the technical difficulty. I wanted to comment on a couple of points of this interesting discussion. I'm an LCSW in California, a licensee of the board, and I work in employee assistance programs, have worked in programs that have a national audience of workers across the country, and currently working exclusively in California. One of the issues I wanted to point out, I think the VA situation points to the potential for of the need for some federal considerations as behavioral health services change to a non-local and more interstate venue and opportunity. I think we need to look possibly beyond just state by state regulation and see if there can be some leadership and research and collaboration with the federal government. I also am concerned about the potential for over-regulation here and whether we have established through any research or complaints and evaluation and monitoring whether there are problems that need to be addressed in this. And I feel that it's very important that we establish any need for training, regulation, and so forth before burdening the professionals with additional regulation. Of course, I also very much agree that the need for mental health services is extraordinary at this time, and I think that it's very important that what we do supports licensees, supervisors, trainees, etc., across the behavioral health spectrum that the board covers to continue to provide and expand mental health services, while also, of course, being concerned about consumer safety and the risks and benefits of some of the new technologies and services that are being offered. I also just briefly wanted to comment on the idea of temporary licenses on interstate practice. And that often in my experience, in my practice, the issue can come up for a single client who may be traveling, whether it's on business or as a student or otherwise. And if you're a therapist with 20 or 30 clients and you have to get special licensing in order to continue to provide services for one client, that can be burdensome. And just wanted to suggest that we might also look at looking at a course of treatment rather than an individual session, and whether if, for example, I'm providing services to a client who is primarily in California and happens to need to go out of state, maybe it's to take care of an ailing relative briefly. Is it reasonable that we should look at just presuming that it is feasible and acceptable and professionally appropriate to continue those services rather than to interrupt it for regulatory reasons and concerns? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Levy. I think what you address is absolutely right on the target, because the especially when you talk about how the nature of the services that we should be monitoring, and whether it should be like, how temporary, whether it's crisis nature, as needed nature, or whether, you're allowed to have, some therapeutic, treatment. And so I think those are all, legitimate, discussion. And so I think, it sounds like that, what I'm here so far, let's see. Oh, actually, before I go there, so moderator, do we have any other public comments?
We do have one additional from Krista Tipton. Krista, your line is open.
Oh, thank you. Well, my comment was that getting a single standard online course for teaching telehealth practices could be good across all of the student populations, gathering CSU, UC, and private programs to have a single standard course that's supported by the BBS here in California. There's already been some collaborative talk about that. And also that the NASW technology standards has a lot of supportive information on supervision regarding ASWs and students and interns. So just wanted to offer that.
Thanks for the resources. That's really, really helpful. Thank you so much, Krista. Any other public comments?
At this time, that is it for the public comments on this item.
Wonderful, wonderful. So, so it looks like, we definitely agree upon that, we need to, continue to, have that, conversation. And it looks like to me that, we haven't quite, so I think in terms of like, whether we should, have some sort of an exemption, or whether it's permitting or allowing out-of-state practice, I think, it looks like that we're definitely going there. And yet, the days, how many days, what is the time period, it looks like, that, there's just not much, preference for now. And, and I think, definitely, all the out-of-state licensees, when they really come to practice, or when they, have a client come back to California to practice, they need to be in compliance with our law. And whether it's like sending them, our, the website for them to really read through, or require them to at least to learn about our program, or whether we, like Krista said, whether we, require them for a training class. That I think that is definitely, one possible consideration, so. And then, what would be, the nature of the services, like, Mr. Levy said, should that be, therapeutic nature, or like the other states, it really varies. So, so I think this is, really good discussion. And so, Roseanne, where should we go from here in that sense? What's your opinion?
The way that I kind of envision this is a nice, I'm kind of envisioning including this as an addendum in other board packets, so that we have this information to serve as a model, at least when we talk about committee items where this is relevant. It might not be relevant for all meetings, but when we're talking about the exemption and emergency situations and allowances like that, this examples of what other states do is probably going to be helpful to get the wording that we want just right. And if something's problematic, we can look at what other states' wording is to see if we have any ideas of how ours can be different.
Right. Absolutely. So, so it looks like, if we, we can actually, there's 7, actually, including, let's see, so for the state-wise, we have 7 different sets, that we can model after. And so, so it looks like to me that, we should probably, would that be helpful that we give you, some ideas, whether, which states that we should model after, right? And
yeah. Again, a big thank you to CAMP for kind of providing an overview so I could sort of pick out the states that are sort of unique. I think that we can kind of use this as, to kind of look at the other states' specific language as we go through this and craft our own language. And then also we have psychology board, which is doing this now, so their regulations are a little bit more, taking into account considerations now. I think that'll be very helpful.
Right. So, so my personal preference, it's really, to pick, the most restrictive, and then the most, flexible, like Washington, D.C., and then, use that as kind of like, comparing to and contrast, so that we can start, kind of like go in between, as we go, and then we can kind of like, moderate, how much, that we can, we need to tighten up or expanding. And so will that work for you, Roseanne?
I think that's a great idea to get us to a great way to get started. It is, yes, this is what this does. This is what this state does. We like that. We don't like that.
Right.
I have a question too. It suddenly occurred to me, I'm not a technology person, but I do know that, for example, we no longer use Zoom because it doesn't have the privacy that we require. So we use WebEx. And, a lot of people use the telephone and they use FaceTime, and I don't know how unsafe that is as far as privacy is concerned. But I think somehow or other we have to consider the privacy, because people are going to care about that a lot. And they want to know that their conversation is private and that nobody else can know what they're talking about. Otherwise, they're not going to talk honestly.
I think, Roseanne, you're about to speak, because I think that was part of the language that, that at the telehealth, legislation that we have, it mentioned.
Our current telehealth regulations do cover that, and they have to, the practice standards, there are products out there that are part of the standards of profession, like typically FaceTime or Skype is not considered a secure modality. That the professional associations actually kind of vet and can recommend at times what products are out there. So I think that's pretty covered. I haven't seen a change in that other than for COVID. I know that the federal guidelines have relaxed the standards a little bit, so that during COVID that it's more available to everybody. But I think once COVID ends, it's going to go back to being certain. They have like Zoom-like products that are for the medical professions that tend to be used.
Yep. Wonderful. So, as you were talking, that Roseanne, I also, kind of scroll down and just make sure that, that I can pick probably, 2 states for you, right? And just considering our discussion, I think, Utah, probably has, the more, I think the language, what we can offer in California, probably the Utah language, cover the most, because it talks about the, the notification, talking about the time period, and the registering, and the possible, the nature of that. It's only short-term transitional mental health therapy. And so I think, I like the Utah one. And then I'm also looking at the, BC one, that it provides, that, the very unique thing about like the practice, allowing practice for the adjoining states. Mm-hmm. So when you're like, so when you go over like here, Sacramento to Reno, it's closer than going down to LA, to Los Angeles. And then, how we can actually, take that into consideration. And so that's my own 2 choices.
Okay, great. Yeah, I'll definitely take a look at those and incorporate that into the into the agenda item for this.
Okay. And so, so at this point, any other public comments in relating to, to how we tighten up, how we compare, these 2, or any other suggestion for Roseanne, for the states that Roseanne should be looking at? Looks like it's all good, huh?
Would you like me to open the Q&A panel again? Because we did
that's
close it at the end.
right. That's right. Okay, please do, moderator.
Okay.
Thank you for reminding me.
No problem. This is the moderator. We've again opened the Q&A panel. If you'd like to make a final comment on this agenda item, please click on the Q&A icon on your screen, type "I would like to make a comment" into the ask field, and submit that to all panelists. And we will pause for just a brief moment.
Yes. So really, the question is that, any other states that you want to, Roseanne, to look at, or any additional comments about the model states? Or my suggestion, DC and Utah. Oh, there's one. So moderator, looks like there is a...
There's Michael Levy.
Yes. Yes.
Michael, your line is open.
Thank you. I was just thinking about this in the context of some of the differences in practices and laws in different states as they apply to behavioral health services. Texas came to mind as they've interpreted issues surrounding duty to warn differently than we have in California. And I just think it would be, although I appreciate the amount of work involved in what I'm about to suggest, that as we think about some kind of reciprocity, for lack of a better shorthand word, in working with other states and with practitioners in other states, that we need to be informed and sensitive to some of the differences in law and practice.
Yes, definitely. Definitely. And I think the duty to warn, or even child reporting requirement is actually very different, across the states. And so I think, Mr. Levy, you bring up a good point, is that, when the person comes to California, to practice law, then how can we get them up to date and up to speed, about, basically our lawful mandates? It's absolutely true. And so, so I think that's, that's why I think, with the, whether it's a link or, to provide them the information about California law, or whether it's to the extent more straight, that we are requiring them to take a class. We don't know, but I think this is actually a good conversation to talk about, like, is how do we make sure that, they can practice lawfully and ethically. So very good. Thank you.
And our next comment comes from Hannah Thompson. Hannah, your line is open.
Yes, this was actually a question for Roseanne related to what we were talking about. I'm wondering, with these states that we're discussing, were these COVID related policy that was created, right? And is there sunset on them? So if we're using this to compare for our long-term planning strategies, is there potential that this is, we're looking at something that's a work in progress that is going to change? Or have these states established these are the standards we want even in a post-COVID environment?
That's a great question. This is not considering COVID. This is their actual, I looked at their actual licensing law. So I did not look at what they're doing temporarily for COVID. This is their actual day-to-day law. So now, I mean, with that being said, I'm sure that a lot of other boards are doing exactly what we're doing right now, in that they're probably looking at what tweaks and adjustments they need to make to their law too. But I actually went, in doing this research, I actually went to the link to each page to the current licensing law and pulled it straight from there. So it's not a COVID waiver or anything like that.
Wonderful. Thank you.
That's why we need many eyes, to kind of find that little little loophole, right? Just to clarify, it's like which lens that we're looking at. Yes, this is a more comprehensive practice, not just about telehealth. Yes. Any other comments? I don't see it. Moderator.
It looks like that's it for now.
Very good. Thank you all so much. So Roseanne, I think I hope you have enough, to move on. And okay.
Okay, great.
Great. Now, so I think we have one more agenda item, and I'm looking at the time. It's 9:57 right now. So should we take a very quick break, so people can stretch and, or should we move on? No preference.
Quick question. Is
Yes.
Christy going to be up next? How long do you? It might be worth it just because I'm assuming that it could take possibly about a half an hour, and I'm sure there's some people that might need a quick break.
Yeah, I think that the next item is going to be kind of a lengthy discussion, so might be a good idea to take a break in case anybody needs it.
Yes, let's do that. So, okay, so let's do, okay, so now it's 9:57. Should we come back at 10:10? Make it easy to remember? 10:10. So let's resume at 10:10, and now we're going to take a break. Thank you all so much. So welcome back to the Board of Behavioral Sciences Policy and Advocacy Committee meeting. And the time is 10:14, and we will go back to return to our discussion item, and that would be the review and discussion of the board's current telehealth regulations. And I believe it's both Roseanne and Christy. So take it away.
So yeah, so I wanted to have the third agenda item be just kind of a general overview of what we have right now. The Business and Professions Code 2290.5 is a more general code section. It kind of is a general overview that applies to all healing arts. So while we might be successful in getting some changes there, where the real changes, if any, are needed, are more likely to be in our own licensing statutes or in our telehealth regulations, which really sets everything out. And that's in 1815.5. We adopted 1815.5 in 2016 as a result of getting more and more questions regarding telehealth. We didn't have any guidance at that time. And so that's really helped a lot, but it's kind of time to take another look at it as the practice continues to evolve. Obviously with COVID, it's evolved a lot in about 10 months. So I've shown some attachments. Attachment C is a letter from CAMP that they had sent a little while after the regulations were adopted, describing a particular concern that they had with 1815.5 subsections F and E of the current telehealth regulations. So we can discuss that a little bit, and then anything else that people might want to discuss about the regulations if they feel that anything needs updating. In terms of CAMP's particular concern, Section 1815.5E states that a California licensee or registrant may only provide telehealth to a client in another jurisdiction if he or she meets the requirements to lawfully provide services in that jurisdiction and if telehealth is allowed in that jurisdiction. And the reason that we added that is because we have a lot of confusion from our licensees about whether or not they can just go to another state and practice with a client if they're licensed in California. A license in California doesn't transfer to other states in a lot of the time. We've shown some examples where there are some states that do have particular laws and exemptions, but still I would say a large majority of them seem to, if the patient is located in that state, you are required to have a license in that state. And no matter whether the board says it's okay or not okay, if the state that has jurisdiction says it's not okay, then it's not okay. Because they're the ones that could ultimately take disciplinary action. So that's why that was added, is to really increase awareness of that, because it's not well understood. And it's really to protect the therapists from opening themselves up to liability. And that's another thing to keep in mind when we're discussing telehealth, is there is, and somebody touched on the fact that, possibly needing federal law, we can change what we allow in California, but we really don't have any control over what other states require, or allow, or don't allow at all. They are their own jurisdiction. So even if we say, oh, it's okay, which we really can't say that. A lot of people call me asking, well, it's okay if I just do this one time, right? I can't say, if I say that it's okay, that means nothing if the other state's not okay with it. So I can't say that, unfortunately. That's kind of the way it is right now. So that's 1815.5E that I just discussed. 15.5F states that failure to comply with any of the board's telehealth regulations is unprofessional conduct. And I think CAMP's concern, and they can correct me if I'm wrong, CAMP's concern, at least at the time, was that having it unprofessional conduct if a therapist fails to check with the other jurisdiction about their laws could lead to unintended consequences. For example, it doesn't necessarily account, they had noted, for a patient that's traveling, patients transitioning to a new therapist, or a patient in crisis. So they had suggested that we switch the ordering of those two so that if they fail to check, that it's not automatically unprofessional conduct on our law, and it functions more as guidance. It's intended to function as guidance. Whether another jurisdiction, like I said, decides to take disciplinary action or not, or against somebody that's doing telehealth, is at their discretion and outside of our authority. And so we can have a discussion about that. I can say, and we had mentioned it when we formulated these regulations too, that we would consider kind of the whole picture. If another state were to take disciplinary action, we would consider what happened and all of the corroborating information that surrounded that. We wouldn't necessarily just take disciplinary action for failing to check. There would probably be another violation that would lead us to warrant that. And I know that there's been some requests for guidance on that. We have to be really careful when we're putting forward general guidance on whether or not we take disciplinary action on something, because every case is a little bit unique and different. So we wouldn't want to put something out there that's too general, but then it gets misunderstood, and there's other circumstances. There's usually other circumstances surrounding things. So that's kind of the issue with putting general guidance out there that, hey, if you don't do this, we're not going to take disciplinary action just on that. Having a kind of statement out there, and there could be other things leading up to it, is kind of problematic from a legal standpoint. So that's kind of why we haven't done that. So that's the particular 1815.5 F and E discussion. I also just wanted to point out, in general, there's a lot of telehealth guidance out there. It's everywhere. There's all kinds of organizations that do telehealth guidance. I took a look at a few examples. Reference D, there's a organization called the Center for Connected Health Policy that discusses cross-state licensing. They have a general overview on their website. AFTRB has teletherapy guidelines that they released just after our telehealth regulations were adopted. They're a little old now. They were released in 2016. That's the latest that I was able to find. But those are quite extensive. And then the American Counseling Association and NASW also have various resources related to telehealth on their websites too. So there's a lot of information out there, and I'll just open it up for discussion and we can see where it goes.
So thanks, Roseanne, for explaining the background information. And so I'm actually really interested in hearing CAMFT, and hear what their concerns are, because it seems to me that the law itself is, we explain and define what the therapist should be, a licensee should be doing when they're practicing telehealth in regarding the out-of-state clients, and yet we describe, and then basically we put we have to really state that if let's say that would be the consequence. And so logically it makes sense. You don't really want to kind of like put it out there and then change the sequence, but at the same time I'm open. So to a certain extent I really want to hear from CAMP and just see what their view is, especially after Roseanne has explained to about the regulations. So do we have any CAMP representatives or? Oh, yes, I see Jennifer Alley. Yay, thank you. So moderator, would you please open the line for Jennifer?
I have unmuted her.
Good morning, everyone. This is Jennifer Alley with the California Association of Marriage and Family Therapists. I'd like to thank the committee for getting together, and I think Roseanne did a really good job of kind of framing our issues with sections E and F of 1815.5. And it's just, and I appreciate, that it's difficult for to put out why or why not, when discipline is going to be pursued with a licensee. I think that we were just looking for, kind of more guidance on what would be deemed unprofessional conduct when performing telehealth services to an existing patient in another state. And definitely concerned that just strictly not, licensing, not checking with local laws, wouldn't be a good enough reason in and of itself. And so, just some, standards or more guidance, if that could be released or developed by the board, that would be helpful. I think the earlier conversations about competency and kind of what is good telehealth would be helpful. But I think that that's, just an ongoing discussion that, we're looking forward to having with this committee and the board in general. And so I think that's all I have, but I do appreciate the ability for the board to, hear us and allow make comments today.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. We always value, your input and just really help us, to find the areas that is unclear, so that is awesome. I love it. So, let's see. So in that sense, so there are plenty of guidance out there, as Roseanne has pointed out. And so I am wondering, so this is good consideration. So, so really, once we, and it seems to me that, Jennifer, you're not really pushing, to have, much legislation change. Really is looking for guidance. So do you think this is now sufficient, that, there are definitely, plenty of other standards, recommended, for the, for the practitioners? And,
Oh, well, thank you, Jen Alley again. No, I think it would be helpful to kind of delink E and F because, technically as it's read now, when you read those two together, it does appear to us that not, checking another state's requirements, is unprofessional conduct because E is the one that the requirement to verify is before unprofessional conduct. So even if those were flipped, it would be a little bit different. I do think that, it is, obviously licensees are going to want to follow California's law in other states. And of course, they're going to want to, make that check. But just having them, the requirement to check before unprofessional conduct does link those in. And again, we want the entire, situation to be evaluated prior to disciplinary action. But it is our read that not verifying would require disciplinary action the way it's drafted now.
Right. So I want to go back to, I want to come to Sabina. So, so if we flip E and F, what is the legal perspective?
I am trying to scroll to that right now. What do you mean flip? You mean just in order?
I think that's what Kemp was, has been asked. It's just to,
Can I weigh in while Sabina is looking for it really quick?
Yes.
Okay. So I was going to say, I think, and Sabina, you can let me know if I'm wrong. I think that's reasonable because we already have a clause in our law that basically says if another state takes disciplinary action on you, it basically says we reserve the right to take disciplinary action. We can take the disciplinary action based on disciplinary action by another state. So my thought is if we're not going to take disciplinary action just because we find out, we would never probably be able to find out that somebody didn't check with the other state unless there was a disciplinary action that got pursued. And if we got that information from another state, we already have the right to look at the case and decide if there is enough, if there is some kind of general neglect or things like that. So my opinion is it would be okay to flip flop.
Yeah, this is Sabina again. Yeah, I agree. And like you alluded to, every case is looked at by a case-by-case basis regardless. And, we're not going to know about those things unless they're brought to our attention. And I was finally able to scroll to the right. I'm on 6-7, I think. So, yes, so I agree.
Great, because yeah, in terms of guidance, it's a lot. I think we can do that in terms of putting out guidance saying, oh, it's okay if you don't do it, but that's a lot more riskier than flip-flopping it and not having it inherently be unprofessional conduct. If they do something that's unprofessional and the other state, takes disciplinary action, and that obviously that would still trigger disciplinary action here, but just the mere fact that they didn't do it, I don't think we're ever even going to know, unless another state were to take action.
Right. It's one of those things where the only way we're going to know is if somebody brings it to our attention.
Can I make a suggestion?
Yes.
Just striking the language altogether, because it really is not necessary. I mean, it should be, the licensees should know if they're going to be practicing telehealth in the other state that they do not want to be acting unlicensed. They don't want to be doing unlicensed practice. So, it's nice to put in there as a kind of, this is what you should do. I think that really resides more in an outreach effort to the licensee, saying if you're going to do this, this is what you need to do. I don't necessarily know if it really adds anything to to our laws per se.
This is Sabina. I think, I want to say, what's the harm in letting someone know that they should be looking into the other jurisdictions' requirements?
But is that something, for stating in law itself, it kind of, unless we're going to do something with that, with that statement or regulation, we're going to be looking for unprofessional conduct that's been, a administrative action from another state to warn us about that. It's just my thoughts. I don't know.
Right. No, I think.
Go ahead, Roseanne.
Sorry. I think the reason that we had originally put that in there is because it's actually surprising how many people aren't aware of that or don't understand that their California license doesn't transfer. I get questions about that all the time, even now still. Yeah. So that's why it was originally put in. I think that it's helpful because it at least makes them think twice about it. So that I would, and I have seen in looking at other states' laws and what Psychology Board is currently doing, they have kind of similar language. So I think it might be okay to leave it in, just because even though we don't really need it, it seems to be needed.
Right, and it's easier to leave in and something easier to point at when somebody doesn't do that. And like you said, many people do not know that, and there's a chance they might have reviewed everything and said, well, there wasn't anything in our laws that said I couldn't or what I should be doing.
And also I think, when we're talking about possibly, if for any out-of-state people to come to California or providing, telehealth, then, to the people who are located in California, then they should understand, also those standards, and understand that, yes, when you, so when you don't do these things, there is a consequence, and what, when you don't do it, this is called unprofessional standard. Unprofessional conduct. So I think to me, it's pretty important that, that's the law is there, however, I do want to make sure that, in terms of the interpretation, how the flip is going to be sound, how it's going to be viewed. And so I'm glad that, Roseanne, you think that it's okay. And Sabina, you think that it's okay. And it's the language and, and I think that, as far as, from the legal point of view, that doesn't really change the intent, of the law. I think to me, that's the, it doesn't matter whether it's, the ordering. So anything else? So maybe I should actually go back to, our board members. So Susan, do you have any other questions about, these particular ordering? and the camp's concern? Okay, thanks, Susan. I see you say no, so just want to, yeah, thank you. Oh, you're still muted.
No.
Oh, good. Now we're crystal clear, so thank you. So, in that sense, so let's open to the public, moderator, and see if there's any other discussion about this.
Okay, and Roseanne and Steve, if your hands are still up, I didn't know if you had more comments or just forgot to lower them.
Sorry, I'll lower it. No, I'm having a little bit of a technical issue, so just so you know.
That's okay.
I'll
That's
take
okay.
my hand down.
I'll just know that you'll just chime in if you need to. And then
Okay.
Jennifer Alley, if you as well could lower your hand. And then we are going to open the Q&A panel. So the Q&A panel is now open for submission of requests for comment. If you'd like to make a public comment, please click on the Q&A icon on your screen. Type "I would like to make a comment" into the ask field, and you can submit that to all panelists. We will pause for a few moments to allow time for submission of requests.
So I don't see any people, any public wants to make a comment.
I am not seeing any at the moment either.
This is great to have double vision. This is the one good time that we have, two pairs of eyes to check it out.
That's right.
That's right. So I think I'm pretty confident that, this is, there's no more public comments. So now in case there's any, I'm sure that, you can let our moderator know. And so looks like now, Roseanne, do we need to make a motion? And so, to, make a formal recommendation to, to change the ordering of, basically, just reverse or flip-flop the ordering of E and F. Or do you want just the discussion?
This is Sabina. Roseanne, you're still muted. Are you having technical? There you go. You might have, are you there?
It's breaking up a little.
Okay.
Are you there? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I think I have an unstable connection a little bit. Sorry about that. So I think that we need a motion about E and F, and then we should discuss if there's any other sections of the telehealth regulations that anybody feels need updating right at the moment.
Okay. Okay. So now, thanks for the direction. And moderator, I do see, there is one attendee, that has a question mark.
There is. It is Karen Leaf. Karen, I have unmuted your microphone.
Okay, thank you. I apologize in advance for possibly not being very bright or what, but I find that I've become increasingly confused as the discussion has gone on this morning. I've always been aware of 1815.5E that one doesn't practice with clients residing in other states, but yet we've had the discussion about what other states or localities do in relation to this issue, and we're looking at that in relation to what California should adopt. So does this mean that people licensed in California are excluded from following the rules that other jurisdictions establish for practicing, even on a short-term basis with people that live in their jurisdiction? Does that make sense?
Yeah, Roseanne, please explain.
Yes, I can explain. So Karen, it's kind of assumed that wherever the client is located, the state where the client is located has the jurisdiction. So if the patient is in California, California laws apply. You have to have a California license right now to practice in California. If not, if you're treating a patient that's in another state, then the other state's laws take precedence. So you need to follow the laws. If you're in Florida, or the patient's in Florida, then you need to follow the laws of Florida. So if Florida requires a Florida license, you need a Florida license. If Florida requires you to let them know that you're doing telehealth, then you have to do that. Whatever they require, the patient is there, they have the jurisdiction. So there's not a lot we can do about that piece, but warn people that they need to check. But if it's in California, that's where we have the patients in California. That's where we have the power to change our law. Do we want to have a window where somebody, if somebody's temporarily in California, do we want to let their therapist that's licensed elsewhere come in? That's where we have the control to kind of decide how to balance public protection with our requirements.
Okay, can you hear me still?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So that means that people licensed in California are not excluded from working temporarily with people in other states, as long as they follow the rules of doing so.
If the other state allows it, correct. Not all states do, but some do. You've
So
seen today the few that do.
Okay, all right.
Just an example of them.
Yeah, okay. So we're not excluded as long as the state provides for it and we follow the rules that the state lays out.
That is correct, yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Karen. Don't ever think that, that's, your question, is invalid, because it is very confusing.
Not at all. You're not the only one there's a lot of confusion around that topic. It's very normal.
Right. So thank you, Karen. So at this time, I want to also, once again, to clarify that, the discussion is not only limit on just E and F, the flip-flop, but, staff really want to use this forum, this forum, again, let me apologize. I said it's a PNA meeting. It's really the telehealth committee. I apologize. So really is also to look at, the text of 1815.5, to see if there's any other comments, that, that the public or board members wants to, make some suggestion for change. So I just want to make sure that, that the public's aware of it. We're not just talking about the flip-flop. So I want to, check in once more, to see if there's any other public wants to make comment about this particular standard of practice for telehealth.
So again, this is the moderator. Our Q&A panel is still open. If you'd like to make a comment, please click on the Q&A icon on your screen, type "I would like to make a comment" into the Ask field, and submit that to all panelists.
So while we're waiting, I think historically, Roseanne and, the committee, or the board actually worked pretty hard to try to, put this set of language, to provide the guidance for the practice. And so, it's also, it was, way back in like 2016 and before, we spent a lot of time, to talk about that. And we finally came up with, the guidance about like, when you do telehealth, how things, what the licensee should do, to make sure that, to make sure that, the client understands the risk and the limitation for telehealth. So this is really a wonderful forum, for the public to, put in the information, at the time of the service. What else the licensee should be doing, in order to, make sure that telehealth can, can implement in a competent and safe way. So I still don't see any comments.
I don't. And member Wong, if you'd like, we can leave the Q&A panel open throughout the conversation on this item. So if anybody does end up thinking of a question or a comment they'd like to make during the discussion, they can chime in. And then whenever you're ready for me to close it, you can just let me know.
Perfect. Seems like a seamless, collaboration. Thank you so much, moderator. And so now before we move on, to close this, Roseanne and Sabina, any other, comments you want to make? I think we're pretty clear. Go ahead, Roseanne.
I actually have a thought. My thought is, I don't think that we actually need a motion right now. What I think would be a good approach is we start the amendments. We'll start amending the section by flipping E and F and kind of hold on that. And then as the committee meets additional times and kind of moves through this process and discusses other aspects, there might be other changes that come up that are wanted. So there might be other amendments. So I think we flip it for now, and then I bring back the amendments at a later meeting to have like kind of a final look. And then the committee would take action to take it to P&A and the board.
Yes. I actually really like that suggestion because, for also for education purpose, the committee, this telehealth committee really provide that more thorough discussion with the stakeholders and the public, about the feedbacks, for this legislation. And so we make a recommendation, and then we move forward to the Policy and Advocacy Committee to have another look. And then the next step is actually the full board meeting, for the final approval. And so at the committee's level, we always just make recommendations. So there's also plenty of opportunities, for the public to give feedback, so that we can continue to modify. So yeah. So Roseanne, so it looks like, okay, go ahead.
Oh yeah, I don't feel like we're ready to go forward to Policy and Advocacy Committee yet, since this is just starting. So I think we just make the change, hold it, and then discuss it again after we've had a few committee meetings and kind of vetted out some other issues. We might have a clear picture if there's any other changes that need to be made, or somebody might think of something.
Right. Thank you. Somebody's talking?
Oh, I said agreed. This is Sabina. Agreed. As you know, this is only the first of maybe many meetings this committee's going to have. So we're going to have potentially plenty of other changes to move forward at a later date.
I totally agree with it. So, because I actually think that, I think it's a good start to just, reverse it first, and then once we ongoing to talk about this, then I think, there's definitely more to come. So, because, I was just thinking back, at our very original discussion about the topics, and this has so much to tie with it. So, so right now, I think we're only seeing, a small part of it. But once the discussion evolves, I'm sure that we can revisit this particular standard of telehealth practice. And then we will see that, maybe there's something that we need to change. So, I think this is a good start. And so in that sense, Roseanne, so would you, so in terms of just, I don't think you need a motion for that, like you say. So we can actually, close the discussion for this topic.
Yeah, I don't think we need to do anything further.
Okay, perfect. So, so in that sense, let's move on to the next agenda item, which is the public comments for items not on the agenda. Oh, again.
I wanted to say before we open up for public comment, we do have one letter from Lyra Healthcare that was included in the public comment. That's included in the meeting materials, and then we can open it up for public comment.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. So we want to, acknowledge that the Lyra Health, we did receive your letter. Yes. So I think the line is open, right, moderator?
The line is open. Our Q&A panel is open. If you'd like to make a public comment on items that were not on today's agenda, please click on the Q&A icon on your screen. Type "I would like to make a comment" into the Ask field and submit that to all panelists. And we will pause for just a brief moment for time for submission.
All right, I'm not seeing any public comment yet.
Nothing yet, and I'm checking the attendee panel. I don't see
We have
anybody.
one. I
Oh,
see
yes, Krista Tipton. Krista, your line is open.
I read the Lyra letter and I wasn't quite sure what they were offering, if they were offering a platform or just education. How did you read it?
So Chris, oh, go ahead, Roseanne.
I think that they were going to be on the line. I'm not sure if Alex can't see the attendees. Here, let's see. Alex.
What is the name you're looking for?
Alex X was.
He is on the line.
Okay. I don't know if Alex, if you want to speak to that, this would be the time for public comment. If not, then we have the letter. But we can't really discuss what we think it means. But if Alex wants to provide feedback, that's more than welcome.
He said he's happy to speak on it. I will open his line. Alex, your line is open.
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi. Thanks for your thoughtful questions. Just to say that I'm here representing Lyra Health along with my colleagues, Danielle and Lisa. The letter was just to express our interest in learning more by being present at the committee and explaining some of the things that we're interested in. And so we are a for-profit company that provides evidence-based therapy over telehealth. In one of our programs, telehealth exclusively, and we operate in California and across the US. And so really it was a letter expressing our interest in learning more here. I think we have a little bit of a perspective around the fact that telehealth works really well in the context that we are practicing it, and we'd love to see more regulation that is friendly to telehealth with the goal of expanding access to care, both in folks in California that don't currently have access easily, and with the idea that we can help train and license more clinicians. So we're particularly interested in the regulation around how associates get fully licensed. So we weren't making a particular request or offering services. We were just stating who we are because we know we're a newcomer to this kind of conversation.
Thank you so much, Alex. And looks like we have Cassandra, right?
Yes, Cassandra Clayton would like to make a comment. Cassandra, your line is open.
Good morning, and again, thank you for providing this forum. It's such a benefit, and I'm learning so much from the content you provided this morning. My question is, who are the gatekeepers for reviewing all these companies, these telehealth companies that are emerging, as far as if they're just ensuring that their policies or standards or regulations are aligned with our laws and regulations administered by the BBS, and whether these telehealth platforms are also taking into consideration the different stipulations for the other states that we discussed earlier this morning, and the time limits that each state specifies in terms of how many days the clinician is able to provide treatment or services. Thank you.
Thank you. So any other public comments? I don't see any else. So if you have, this is the time for you to, to share. I don't see any else. Moderator, do you?
I see none as well. Would you like me to close the panel?
Not yet. We can,
okay.
But the one is, so let's close this session. So it looks like, we have no more public comments for items not on the agenda. So the next one is the suggestions for future agenda items. So any board members, Susan, if you have any, you can feel free to share, or the public, this is the time now, for the suggestion for future agenda items. So I think we probably, this is good. I think this has been a very robust discussion, and I think this is wonderful that, it's all been expressed. I think, we can use this, as an end of the work week. Okay, seeing none, then I think, next one is my favorite agenda item. It's called adjournment. So the time is 10:53, and I want to wholeheartedly thank all of you to participate. And there are definitely more to come for the opportunities for you all to share your professional opinions and your observations really help the board to make the regulations even more perfect. So thank you all so much for participating, and I hope to see you all in the next meeting, and have a wonderful weekend. Thank you all.